I wanted to create a video about Clo3D avatars and also about what other options do we have if we want to use maybe a different looking avatar or a more accurate avatar. We are somewhat limited by the accuracy of the Clo3D avatars, the ones that come by default, because they are great in some aspects. They are quite customizable, especially in how they look, the skin tone, the makeup, and the hair, but they are not as customizable as they could be in relation to their measurements and also the proportion. So that's why I wanted to compare that default Clo3D avatar with other avatar options that we have in the market. So let's start with the Clo3D avatar. I'm going to open a default one, and as we know, the Clo3D avatars, they have several sizes in this folder that we can apply. So we can choose any of these pre-made sizes. We can double click and it applies automatically to our avatar. But we also have the option of edit specific measurements in the avatar editor. So we can edit this waistline to a measure that is smaller than what this base size tells us. But there are some measurements that aren't as easily editable. And for me, that's a very important measurement because I'm a lingerie pattern maker, and that's the bust measurement. So if I wanted to edit this measurement, if I wanted my avatar to have a bigger cup size, I have the option of increasing the bust circumference here. But when I do that, immediately what happens is that everything else increases too. So it doesn't only increase the bust circumference, it increases the under bust circumference. And that increase goes all around. So we are not changing the cup size. We are always keeping the same cup size and cup shape. And I would love for Clo to implement some way to create a bigger cup size, because this is very limiting, especially for lingerie designers and pattern makers. I'm going to reset this to the default measurements. And let's see also this crotch area of the avatar. And if we try to put on this avatar some underwear garments or any garment actually that is fitting very close to the crotch, we will see that we will find some wrinkles and that it doesn't fit correctly, it doesn't fit well, because this space that the avatar has between the legs is too small. It's not similar to what a real person has. So we are never going to be able to fit accurately an underwear pattern because the avatar doesn't allow us to do that. There are some tricks. For example, we can modify the pose of the avatar. We can open the legs a bit, so that way we have some extra space here, but it's not going to be a perfect simulation or a perfect translation of what happens in real life. That said, of course, this is relevant for people that use Clo3D primarily as a pattern making tool, which I'm included in that group. But if you're using Clo3D more from a design standpoint or even from an animation or purely 3D design standpoint, then it's not as critical. You could modify the pattern to be smaller in the crotch so that it fits the avatar better. But in that way, you're losing that ability that Clo has of testing patterns that are going to be reproduced in real life. It would be a different pattern that you use just for digital purposes. And myself, I'm more interested in the possibility of doing both, of having a digital twin of a product that exists in the physical space or that is going to exist in that physical space once we try it and test it in Clo. So now what I'm going to do is to compare this avatar with other options that we have available. And in order to compare the avatar itself and the measurements, I'm going to use a size set that is going to be more or less similar to the other avatars that we are going to open in the program. So I'm going to apply one of the sizes included in the European Atelier Curvy size range. I'm going to use size 38. And now let's talk about what other options we have available. One of them, probably the easiest one, is to use an avatar made in a different software. And in this case, the most popular is Daz Studio. This is the Daz Studio interface, and in this software we have several like base people-based bodies. Some of them already have applied skin, hair, some specific body types, but we also have these simple, like basic human beings, in this case, a female body. So I'm going to open one of them. So if we select any of the parts of this avatar, we have these transform controls here. So we can, for example, make the waist super smaller, or we can do even very small adjustments to, in this case, the direction of the breast, and not only the scale, but also the width and the height of that breast. The problem is that now we have to apply all of these modifications that we have made in this side. We should apply them to the other side and be very careful about that if we want to achieve a symmetric avatar. Good thing about that is that everything, or almost everything, is customizable, from the proportions of the body to the color of the hair, the eyes, or anything else. But the bad thing about that is that when we are changing the proportions of the body, we are changing, for example, this waist measurement, we are doing this blind. We don't know what's the measurement of that waist. So one solution could be to export this avatar, measure it in Clo, and then import it again in Daz, continue modifying it, measuring it again in Clo, so that we can check that we are getting the measurements that we need, and so on. This is a very tedious process, but there is a plugin that is called Measurement Metrics, and I think it's around $50–60 that allow you to take measurements inside Daz 3D. So we could use that plugin to create an avatar according to the measurements that we need and with the proportions that we need. And then once we have it, we can select the avatar, go to File, and export it so that we could use it in Clo. And that is exactly what I've done here. I have my Daz 3D avatar here. I exported just the basic body, the base size, if you want to call it that way, and I have opened it in Clo. And right away we can see some differences. We can see, for example, that the basic pose already has the legs a bit open and it has a bit more space between the legs. Another thing that we can see is that the proportions are a bit different. The cap size in the Daz avatar is way bigger than the one in the Clo avatar. So the good thing about the Daz avatar is that it's very customizable in Daz. When we import it here, we cannot keep editing it. We cannot open the avatar editor and edit the measurements within the program. We could if we use the function of auto-convert to avatar. But in that case, Clo kind of takes the Daz body shape that we have created and it translates it into a Clo body. So what we get is this thing that I have already done here. This would be the same avatar, but just auto-converted to avatar with the option of being size editable. So if I select this avatar and go to avatar editor, now I see that I can actually edit the measurements. So I can go and increase the bust circumference, but we have first the same problem. When we increase the bust circumference, everything else increases. And of course, if we look at the body shape, it doesn't have the body shape that we have created in Daz anymore. It has the body shape that a regular Clo3D avatar has. So this avatar is kind of useless because we took our super customizable avatar from Daz and just converted into a pretty generic avatar in the same shape as the Clo avatar. But now what happens if we don't want to spend all that time creating a super customized avatar in Daz and we just want to do something like this, like just apply a size set to an avatar and have an avatar that is realistic and well proportioned? Then we have the option of avatars that are created usually by companies that specialize in creating dress forms, the physical dress forms. But now they have done the change to the digital world and they are translating their dress forms to virtual avatars, so virtual dress forms in a way. And the good thing about those companies is that they have a lot of experience. Usually also they have created their dress forms based on studies on the population of specific countries or specific ages. So they are supposed to be very, very accurate and specific for fitting in fashion. So one of these companies is Alvanon. That is the one that I have used the most because they have a free trial of their avatars that I'm currently running out of. And also another company that I have heard of is Figure Forms. I haven't had the chance to try all the Figure Forms avatars, but they look pretty good. But the Alvanon avatars, I had the chance to try them during the past few months. So given that this Clo3D avatar was a size 38 in the European Atelier size set, let's use the same size set for the Alvanon avatar. This would be the equivalent of this Clo avatar. This is a size 38 to European Atelier. And something to keep in mind about Alvanon avatars, and usually any of these avatars created by dress form making companies, is that they are not free. They have a subscription cost. So let's take advantage of this free trial while it lasts, and let's check these Alvanon avatars. Right away we can see that the body shape, it's kind of similar to the Clo3D one, but also a bit different. For example, the space between the legs is wider, even though it's still a bit smaller compared to the space that a person has there. And also the breast shape is more defined, maybe a bit bigger, probably is closer to a B cup than what the Clo3D avatar is. Now, the bad thing about these avatars is that the Alvanon avatars aren't size editable, and Alvanon has a lot of different sizes. They have probably hundreds, if not thousands, of different sizes. But if you need, for example, this exact avatar but with the waist 3 centimeters larger, you cannot do that. So you have to work with the sizes that Alvanon gives you. That said, there are a lot of sizes, and the good thing about these sizes is that they are based, as I said before, in research done on the population of several places, and they have compiled the measurements and the body shape of each different country. Have different size set for European women. They have a different size set also for China, for example. If you know that you are going to create patterns that are going to a specific target market, for example, you want to sell your brand in China, you can open one of the Alvanon avatars that are created for the Chinese market and be sure that the proportions and the sizes and the measurements are according to that part of the population. They even have a specific size set dedicated to lingerie. They have specific avatars, and I have been using those pretty extensively. So let's open one of them. This is the Alvanon avatar that is supposed to be a 34B, so the usual base size. And right away we can see that the body shape is quite different from the others. We have quite a bit of space between the legs, and this is going to help fit better underwear garments. And if we look at the breast shape, we can see that it's much more defined and also quite bigger compared to the other two. And something that you might notice is that the center of the breast, the nipple, is placed a bit higher than in the other ones. And that's because this avatar is supposed to have the body shape of a person wearing a bra. So that's what happens usually when you're wearing a well-fitting bra, that the breast is slightly lifted upwards. So that's why the breast shape is a bit different. So if we wanted to compare the measurements of these avatars, I've just done that. So we have all the measurements here. And for example, we can see that the bust measurement in the Alvanon one is the bigger one. There's more difference between the under bust and the bust. That's why the cup size is bigger in this avatar. Also, regarding to the cup size, as we said before, we have more distance between the under bust and the nipple in this avatar. than in the other ones. Something that is interesting to check is that the measurements of this Alvanon avatar are quite similar to the Clo3D one. So even though the measurements are almost the same, we see that the body shape itself is quite different, and that's going to affect how the clothes fit in one and the other. So now let's do just that. Let's try the same garments in all 4 avatars and see how they compare. So here I've made the same pattern for all of them. It's a basic pattern of a bralette and a brief. I haven't tested this pattern, I just drafted for this exercise, and it's supposed to be drafted, the bralette for a size 34B and the panty for a size small. And the parameters that I've used for this simulation is just a knitted fabric. I applied elastic to the pieces that would be elastic, like for example the band in the bralette or the straps or the waistband of the panty, and all of the pieces have a particle distance of 7, and also I changed the skin offset of all of these avatars to be the smallest possible. So let's check how they fit. So if we simulate, we see first that we have something going on here. It's quite wrinkled, the pieces are fighting with one another and with the avatar, but let's give it a bit of an advantage given that the Daz 3D avatar already has the legs a bit open. So I'm going to open the legs of the Clo Avatar too, and let's simulate again. So it's still not looking perfect, but it's a bit better than before, but we can see some wrinkles still and the pieces fighting one another. But the bralette is where the thing is. So the bralette fits bigger than it should. It's supposed to be a 34B, so we can definitely conclude that this avatar is not a 34B. We can see extra fabric on the sides, on the bottom, and also here on the dart. It's creating this like pointy shape here because there's not enough volume on the avatar. And let's compare how it fits in the Alvanon avatar that actually had very similar measurements to this one. So if we go to the panty first, it's a bit wrinkled here, the fit is still not perfect, but if we take a look at the bralette, it's very interesting because even though they had the same bust measurement, it fits, I would say, slightly better in this one. It's not as big as it was in the Clo Avatar, but what is interesting is that the excess fabric, we have it here, we have it around the armhole at the top of the cap, and that is probably because the cap shape of this avatar is quite flat on this area at the top of the cap. The volume is concentrated at the bottom of the cap, while in the Clo3D avatar it didn't have much volume at all, but this part of the neckline is a bit more rounded. So that's why it fits actually better in the top part of the cap in the Clo avatar. Let's take a look now at the Daz avatar. And we see that the panty also has a bit of the same issues. It's, I would say, almost as bad as the Clo one because it has this weird wrinkle, but the bralette fits surprisingly well. If we remember, the bust size of this avatar was very similar to the 34B Alvanon one, and that means that the avatar actually feels the volume of the bra. Also, it's interesting because the cap shape of this avatar was also quite heavy on the bottom, and it's interesting to see how well this bralette actually fits in this one. So let's compare it with the one that should fit the best, that is the Alvanon avatar, the 34B, and we see immediately that the panty fits much better, that we can actually assess the fit of this panty, the width of this crotch compared to more or less something similar to what a person would wear. I would always fit on a person regardless. I would never go straight from a 3D sample to a final garment because the avatars in Clo, they don't tell you all the information. They don't tell you if the garment is uncomfortable or if it's riding up when you move, or if some parts are itchy or they are rubbing in uncomfortable places in your skin. But as a first impression, as a way to probably eliminate the need of an extra sample, this is very useful. We can assess the fit. If we look at the bralette, it's quite interesting because we have some extra fabric on the side. The bralette fits quite well. The extra fabric is barely noticeable, but I think it's interesting because the other avatar, the Daz 3D, it didn't have that extra fabric. It seems that it fits better on this avatar. And I think that's because of the breast shape. Like, this avatar was supposed to have the breast shape of a person with a bra on, with a bra fitted, but that is supposed to be an underwire bra, so the shape is more centered. The nipples, for example, are more towards the center, and the breast is pulled forward, while the Daz 3D avatar, it has quite a relaxed bust shape. The breasts are more separated, so that's actually more similar to what happens when you wear a bralette. And I think that's why it fits so well in this avatar compared to the Alvanon one. Obviously, if you are trying to fit an underwire bra, the shape would be better than any of the others. But in this particular case, it's interesting to see that this extra fabric here might not be necessary to correct that, because it's supposed to happen. Your breast is supposed to be a bit more on the side when you're wearing a soft bra like that. Aside from that, it fits quite well, and it's interesting to see also the nipples through the fabric. This is the only avatar that has the nipples like this with some volume, so it's helpful when you're fitting because you know where the center of the breast is. But if you are going a step further of this fitting phase, if you're going to model, for example, a foam cap bra, you would have to fight a bit with Clo in order to avoid that nipple peeking through the fabric. If you want to do that representation of that garment to create an animation or a render that is going to be used in e-commerce, then this nipple may not be what you want to show in the final render. So now that we have tried all our avatars and we have tried and made a virtual fitting of the same garment in all 4 avatars, we had some conclusions to make. One of them is that measurements don't tell the whole story. As we can see, these 2 avatars had very, very similar measurements, but the fit in both of them is way different. Even when we measure a person in real life, we have to pay attention to the body shape and where the volume of the body is distributed. So that's something to take into account, and also the importance to use the correct avatar for your specific end use. If I was going to fit lingerie, especially underwire bras, I would use the Alvanon Avatars. For soft bras, for bralettes like this one, probably the Daz 3D would be a good match. If I was going to do just outerwear, the Alvanon and even the Clo Avatar, if the cap size is not an issue, I could work with either one of them. But if my end goal with my 3D work is not to fit a garment, it's just to create a nice 3D image, a nice 3D render or an animation, I could work probably better with the Clo3D avatar or the Daz avatar, because you can change the pose, you can animate those, and you can also modify the appearance of both of them. It's actually easier on the Clo one because we have so many presets already in the program, but we could do very crazy things in Daz 3D too, especially if we want to modify the body shape. So that's also something to take into account when you're going to select an avatar to start a project. And of course, another issue is how much are you willing to spend? And when I say spend, I'm talking about both money but also time, because in the case of the Daz avatar is the cheapest one, save for the Clo one, but it can be super customizable. You can do whatever you want with them, but the time that you're going to spend with this one is way bigger than in the other ones. So maybe it's worth it for you. Maybe you always work with 1 or 2 sizes, so you can invest that time. You can sit and spend 2 or 3 days just creating a couple of really good, really customized for you avatars in Daz, and you can just reuse them over and over again in your projects. But if you don't want to spend that time, then the Clo3D avatar is the best, and even the Alvanon avatars that give you very good proportions straight out of the box. In terms of money though, the Alvanon avatars are quite an expense. I'm not sure how much is the subscription, but obviously it's a monthly subscription. subscription, so it's a cost, or you can buy your own. I think you can buy a size set maybe, or just an avatar, but it's quite an amount of money and it's quite a commitment. And also something to note about the Alvanon ones is that you cannot edit them, you cannot animate them, and you cannot export them to external software. So if, for example, you want to create here your garment and then export the project to Blender and do a render there, you can do that with these two avatars here, but you cannot do that with the Alvanon ones. And if you're still a bit confused with all these characteristics and decisions that you have to make, I have made a chart with the main features of each avatar and the areas where it shines, where it's best to use for. And you can download that using the link in the description. And of course, if you have any questions, just write them down below. And if you have any suggestions for a video that you would like me to make, I would be very happy if you also wrote that down in the comments. So that's all from me today. I hope it has been helpful, and let's see you soon in the next video.